Hello, everyone, and welcome to another horrific chat. Tonight, I'm joined by author Clay Vermulm as we discuss his inspirations, aspirations, and journey into horror. Clay, welcome back to the show, and I think we've annoyed the internet gods.
Yeah, I think we
Uh,
have. I do have a tendency to do that.
They don't like us. Yeah, we're a couple of minutes late, folks, because the gods of the internet have decided you shall not broadcast. You'll do weird stuff, and you'll not mate. And
Oh man, I wish I knew how to appease them, but internet gods, I beg your forgiveness. I beg
I
your
don't know. I've
forgiveness.
tried unborn. I've tried unbaptized. Is is there they have to be born in a certain month? What offerings do you require, internet gods?
Yeah,
Be
seriously,
clear. Be clear. We're only mere mortals.
exactly. Yeah, just give us a sign. I'll sacrifice anything you need me to sacrifice.
But
Not
welcome back,
shy.
mate. Good to see you again. Obviously been a wee minute, but you're no stranger to the show, so that's one thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be back, Colin. Thanks so much for having me, man. This show's a blast.
Chaos and all included.
Yep,
We
absolutely.
don't want to look too professional, like we don't want to spoil people. They expect it
No,
all the time.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. You gotta set the bar low, and nobody's ever disappointed.
That's it.
That's been my motto.
I aim to keep it there. Ah, dear. So obviously you've been on a few times now, and this is sort of the formal interview, if you can call it that, because I don't do formal interviews because I think they're boring. I don't really
Sure.
get to chat about anything. So obviously we're going to talk about you, your work, how you get into horror, how you get into writing, and also you're in a similar position to me. You've two sort of you've your writing and your podcast work, which are both like doing one is really time resource, heavy, and it's a major commitment. And it'd be interesting to hear your take on how you like manage your time and just keep your head straight. Because sometimes I do wonder, you get some days go, why am I doing this to myself?
Yes, no, you're definitely not wrong about that. Doing one is a huge time commitment. Doing two is borderline masochistic, if not just fully masochistic. But I started like doing the podcasting because ultimately I wanted it to help out my writing career. I figured it would be a good way to make connections with other people in the industry, and it's a good way to create content for me that isn't my writing content because I don't really like having to churn out writing content. I like to like write at my own pace. I
Mhm.
like to write what I want to write, and I like to write when I want to write. Which I do write consistently, but I don't want to have to like release a story a week or some shit like that.
Yep.
So for the podcast, for me, that's an easy way to like still release writing based content through like fermented fiction and my one we'll talk about today, Beneath the Rain Shadow. Um, but without having to churn out a bunch of like stories at the will of the internet gods, as we were saying earlier. It's easier
Yeah.
for me to just blabber into a microphone for the internet gods, and hopefully that's enough to appease them here and there.
I don't know. They are fickle.
They are so fickle. This is true.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find though that I've found this myself when you don't put that pressure on yourself as a writer, that you've another outlet that you actually do create more, but it's subconsciously. Where if you're just like, oh, gotta, you actually work against yourself and you get burnout. Where when you have a different focus or you can switch gears, that's it's a break's a change as good as the rest, as I say. But you're still being productive.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I definitely have the mindset that if you rest too long, you definitely rust. But the podcast is like, at least our podcast, Fermented Fiction, and I know this one seems like a similar outlet. But when you're analyzing story, when you're studying story, when you're being a part of story on a consistent basis, that's always still helpful to your creative process, I think. And like you said, it gives you another place to go with that energy so you're not burning yourself out on writing. I do have trouble with writing. It's probably why I've never finished my novel yet. I have like a ton of short story collections, but I have a hard time finishing longer projects, and I am a little bit more prone to that burnout sometimes when I do set too many deadlines for myself. And I like deadlines, but I like them to be achievable ones that that I can kind of like wrap something up, finish something, rather than something I'm chipping away on for years and years and years. That's pretty hard for me to stay enthusiastic about. But I don't know about you.
No, I actually just I've been talking about this, doing interviews myself, promoting various things, but I just binned the trilogy that I was working on because you know when you like feel like you're spinning wheels and
Yeah.
you're not seeing an end goal, and it wasn't even I didn't think it was just it wasn't working. I was
Hmm.
trying to do horror fantasy. Now I know you can do dark fantasy, but the fantasy genre is so constrained that to
Hmm.
give it that, oomph into the horror realm, actually, found it doesn't work, and it was actually just ruining. You find yourself dialing back, and I was getting really, really frustrated. And then, especially when you deal with concepts like magic, straight away you have to then write rules. And the more I was doing it, the more I was actually moving away from the story and more into the technicality. And then, oh god, now I've got to do maps. Now I've got to do this, and then you're falling in that formulaic, horrible just paint by numbers, which sci-fi fantasy really are bad for.
Hmm.
You read one, you read them all. It's very rare to get a unique fantasy story now or a unique sci-fi story because it's all, they fall into those sort of realms where at least with horror, you can let loose, you can go into a certain sphere, it can meld into another subgenre. You're not just tied into like if you do cosmic horror, for example, that does not negate you from psychological horror, for example, because that's a part of it. You
Yeah.
can go into all
Hmm.
these realms and like feel free that the story's the important thing. I've found with other things that you just get into the technicalities and that's it. You've actually killed your own story in your own head because you've lost any passion for it because you may as well work 9 to 5 in an office because that's what it starts to feel like.
Yeah, I could see how it feels that way. I wonder if do you think that's because horror very much relies on the unexplained to kind of create the environment that the reader wants? That horror, so much of it comes from what they don't understand, what they don't see, what the horror is. And you don't really understand that until if you're in the kind of story that reveals it at the end, you maybe get to see it. But a lot of the time, you never get a full understanding. Whereas I feel like your fantasy and sci-fi readers, they do want to understand. That's like kind of what they're there for. They're
Mhm.
there to understand the concepts and the magic systems and the world building, and there's sort of like a link to a history there, or a future imagining. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's
Is
it.
that what?
Because, for example, when I started getting into magic, then I was like, okay, how are they going to use runes? You imagine going to runes and like, oh fuck, right, got to use these runes because if I don't use this particular set, then I'm gonna, that rune doesn't fit with that because 1,000 years apart. And you're just like, oh, what the hell? May as well. And like I said, I was beating myself up, and then I just binned the project because I'm like, no, that's it, I'm done. I need to walk away from it. I'm actually not being productive
Yeah, yeah.
because
That
this is
that
never going to see the light of day.
That's what happened to my fantasy novel as well. I kind of got into the same thing. I ended up writing, oh man, just shy of 200 pages of like backstory, like world building and magic system shit and stuff. And then by the time I finished that, I was like not stoked to write the story anymore, unfortunately. And so yeah, it's still sitting at like 50 pages while I have like a 200-page Bible. Maybe I'll go back to it someday, but
Yeah, is that the difference? So if you're primarily a storyteller, that's like I know that's my focus, and we've talked about movies, obviously, and reviewed them, and that's as you know, is my focus is the story. Everything
yeah.
else is just icing on the cake.
Hmm.
The actors, the special effects, the characters are all just icing, but the actual story is the thing that carries you along. And if you
Yeah.
don't have that, you've nothing.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I would say I think there's, 1,000 different ways to tell a story.
Hmm.
Some people like to have their story a little more through the world, like those maximalist readers who want to know every little thing. I've just been, we've been going through the best science fiction and fantasy of the year for this class I'm taking. We go through the three best of the year anthologies. It's a really good class with Richard Thomas if you're into that kind of thing, called Advanced Creative Writing Workshop.
Mhm.
But the premise is we read stories from each of the best of the year collections and just like critique them and analyze them. And um, you will you see such an array of storytelling in that story, like in those collections. We read one last week where it was this extremely like poetic prose, super in-depth writing. You really had to read like every single word or you got completely lost. It was like that kind of story where it's so defined and so like literary and powerful in the prose itself that like it didn't feel like I had much room to use my own imagination. It
Hmm.
was like all I could do to keep up with this, how advanced this author was writing, to imagine it exactly the way they wanted. And then the next story we read for that same class was like one that was more minimalist. It was very character centric. The world was kind of loosely defined. But to me, that allowed me to use my imagination more and kind of fill in the blanks, which I think is something that horror does really well. And I prefer that kind of storytelling. So though, like maybe that one story was not as technically like beautiful or proficient or whatever you want to say, like S tier, um, I liked it more. So
Yeah.
I think it is pretty subjective too.
That's actually, it's interesting the fact you're doing a course, because I've noticed this a lot in the sort of indie writing sphere. There's a lot of us coming in now. Do this course to become a writer. Do this, write this way, and I'm seeing people, especially now that I've become a publisher,
Hmm.
people are so hung up on the technicalities.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it will be shun formatted. It'll be this. It'll be that, and then they're forgetting to tell the story.
yeah, totally.
And people also think they can't be a writer, and I think it's a grift. I think a lot of it now there can be. I don't want to like use a big brush and a lot of tar, but there is a lot of grift out there of I'm going to make money, because it's the oldest trick in the book, selling courses, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it
Yeah,
it
that
certainly can be.
entrepreneurs have been doing it for decades. It's one of the oldest thing from the Wolf of Wall Street. You name it. I'm selling you a course. I'm doing that.
Yeah,
And it's a Ponzi scheme, and everyone has to get on to a certain tier, and then you can sell it to other people and bring them on board. Blah blah blah, and it stops being about being creative. And I'm worried that people are going to fall into that trap, thinking
hmm
they're getting help, or I don't want to see people getting taken advantage of, but then I'm seeing a lot of online bullying where people are talking other people down who are just starting out. Oh, you haven't
mm.
done this course, you haven't been with this mentor, so you're not worthy, and you can't play in our playground, sort of, so to speak. And
Yeah, yeah.
it incenses me. In fact, it's part of my motivation for starting uh, the publishing company, and getting in, throw my hat in the rings. Like, well, I'm going to be part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, totally.
Have you seen that? And how has your experience doing a course? Have you got that in the back of your mind, or do you not think about it when you take part in these sort of things?
No, I love that question, Colin. And I love your mission as well. Mine is the same. I've been self-publishing my own collections and anthologies. My first anthology was Bad Spirits. And that was like, I just did that myself. And my submission call asked specifically for like oft rejected stories.
Mhm.
Because you're totally right. There's a gatekeeper aspect to it. And there is that benefit to who you know instead of what you know and what you're doing. And people want to jump through those hoops because they think it will make the journey easier. But ultimately, like those things can help. They can help. But they're only going to be worth your time if you already like are further along on the journey, in my opinion. Anyway, like you've already published a couple things. Like people don't care if you've taken a class if you still haven't published anything. Like you kind of have to have both of those gatekeeper check
Mhm.
marks to get past the gatekeepers. And frankly, I say fuck the gatekeepers. Like just write your stories, search for the markets that fit you, keep doing the work, and like keep putting yourself out there both story wise, and go to conventions, go meet people. To me, that's way more important than taking a class. um just having beers with people is huge. I mean, there's
Mhm.
not much more impactful than actually meeting people in person, I would say. And I don't know what you think about this as a publisher now, but for me, if I've met you in person and you send a story across my desk, I think we're just biologically wired to give that person, more of an automatic shot. Like you're
Yeah.
at least going to read that person's work. You're at least going to have like a somewhat intrinsic interest that you just simply don't have for somebody you've never met in person.
Yeah, and
Um,
even I include this as well. I know it's because it's impossible to get around the world, and be to
yeah.
every convention, but I include, people I've talked to obviously go to the top of the list, but I always say that doesn't mean it's the end of the list. Always welcome new
Yeah, no,
people.
for sure. For sure.
People who have submitted before to the narrative fiction segment I have, Horrific Tales, which is where the anthologies come from. are
Mm-hmm.
always going to go top of the list because they've given me work. They've let me use their work for free, and it's been a quid pro quo, as in I'm doing promotion as well as
Right.
making content. So we're not, and I don't lie about the fact that I get something out of it too. That's a thing, a very important thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're all it's a partnership. I take on with authors that come on to the show and everything else, or somebody that's come on for an interview, are always going to get preference because they've given me their time, and I
Yeah.
think that's important. Also, got to know people like yourself. You're no stranger to the podcast, so it's not like this is going to be a difficult conversation because we've been here loads of times, so it's cool. But yeah, that is worth 100 times. But just people won't take that step,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the people I'm worried about now. Are there a lot of dreamers? Are there a lot of fantasists that are never going to write? They always join the groups, writing groups. I think I've talked about this before. They'll always join, but they're never going to put pen to paper, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
the way they are. But they'll always comment. You can't help those people. They're a lost cause, and they're always part of it. The people I'm
That's
worried
true.
about
It's true.
are like anything, starting anything, putting yourself out there creatively is daunting. I'm sure you'll agree. But
Oh
I don't
yeah.
want to see somebody get quashed because of a bitchiness or gatekeeping or somebody trying to run a grift, or they think that there's only one way, one path of entry. That's what the
Mm-hmm.
mainstream publishing, the big five, did. They locked up the market,
Yeah.
and nobody thought there was any other way in apart from to get traditionally published. And that's you can do that. I'm not saying don't,
No.
but
Yeah.
that's not your only path of entry. And the important thing is your work.
Yep.
You being as best, giving the best work you can and improving your craft. That's the important thing.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Like there's innumerable means of entry now, which is great. But I do think we also, and this is the part that I worry about with indie a
Mm.
little bit, is like make sure you're doing the work, make sure you are getting editors, make sure you are getting like finding people to read your work and getting other opinions. Like don't just hit publish, because that is another way to like
Oh,
really shoot
absolutely.
yourself in the foot.
And you have to get people who are honest with you.
Yep,
And that's really
absolutely.
hard today because there's people don't want to offend, and especially if people make friendships that don't want to that's me actually for the first time giving rejections. That was hard.
Sorry, yeah.
That
Hmm.
but you have to be realistic and go, well, this is the theme, this is the voice this particular anthology has. I've only so much room. There's a cost to figure in as well, blah blah blah. Sorry, not this time around.
Yeah.
That's a reality, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the journey. If somebody comes back again and they have something that fits, perfectly fine. That's it all works. But where we go? This isn't really a question. This is just a spitball, I suppose.
Yeah,
But
we're just
yeah,
chatting. I mean, you had asked about classes earlier
yeah.
too, and
So is that in you're taking part in a class? Obviously, you're at Well, what made you think? What made you do that? Let's start with that. That'll be a good one.
yeah, so I have taken bad classes and I've taken good classes. I'm definitely like somebody who wants to always learn more. And my main advice, like in seeking out good classes, is like avoid anybody who sounds like they are if they're promising you that they are going to give you an answer to the writing world, they're lying. They can't do that. So I like my main thing when seeking out classes is just look for the classes that are like cultivating community, that are curated by industry professionals, and that are like centered around doing the work, if that makes sense. I know
Mhm.
it can sound like top 10 ways to market your product is doing the work, but it's not. That's like different work, first of all. And second of all, like there's no top 10 that's going to guarantee you anything. Like people can give you the 10 starting places, maybe to like make your query letter, like 10 things you have to have in a query letter. But at the end of the day, like if you send in that 10 things list query letter, every agent has seen that a million times because it's the boilerplate version of a good query letter.
Yeah.
An actual good query letter comes from researching the publisher, reading stuff that agent has published and gotten sold and that agent takes on, and like developing a sort of like understanding and almost relationship with this editor or this publisher or this agent, whoever you're like going after with your query letter. So like you can only learn that from like doing the work. So I would say classes like, and I highly recommend Richard Thomas's classes because he is an industry professional. He's published internationally. He's all over the place. He has edited Gamut Magazine and Dark House Press. He's very established. He's also a very cool guy. He's like very open and helpful, and he wrote the foreword for my new book. You know, like he's an
Mhm.
altruistic, sharing kind of guy with his time and his knowledge and his professionalism. Um, but his class, Advanced Creative Writing Workshop, it's not like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to the 10 ways to write a short story. It's like, we're going to take the three best of the year collections. We're going to select works out of them. We're going to read them, and then we're going to critique them as a group as if that author was in our critique group. And we're going to use that to analyze what makes these stories work for us. Why are these stories considered top tier in the genre? What makes them work as stories as a whole on an objective level that they have reached this higher echelon of being chosen by like John Joseph Adams to be in the
Mhm.
best of the year anthology. Um, and then we also bring in our own stories and we get those critiqued in the same room, you know? So it's all like it's creating community because we're all sharing our work with each other, and there's a certain like intimacy and connection to that that lasts. And we're also like actively improving our craft. We have to write 4 short stories throughout the course. We have to like put them in front of people and get them critiqued. So like I will always recommend those kind of classes that
Mhm.
like,
That sounds good.
you know what I mean?
Yep.
But the ones that are like a bullshit, here's your 5 ways to become a best-selling author. That class is a scam. Most of the content's probably written by AI these days. And if it costs anything more than free, then don't take it. That's
That was fun enough because one of my co-hosts, Dale, she has a channel and she gives away busy free writing tips every
sure.
week. She got slated,
Oh yeah.
absolutely slated.
Oh
What are
no.
you giving that away for free for? That's part of a course. How dare you? And people actually went for her over that,
Hmm. Wow. Okay.
and you're just like, what the hell? What is wrong with you? How precious or how fragile are you that if um your content is that weak that if somebody makes the better content or uses the tips or learns tricks, and the technical things, not even, story format, let's just talk about everything on it. They're quite useful actually. World building or sensory, bringing sensory stimulus into stories. What your
Hmm.
character, if this smells, this step into a room, they smell grass, or those sort of things that you might not necessarily think of initially, but she's doing a lot and she got absolutely hammered. That's why I'm very dubious about courses because there's so many bad faith actors out there, and I suppose it's why indie creators got a bad rep in the first place because once again, bad faith actors that don't
Yeah.
actually want to do the work. They think um, they're going to just shove it out there, and stupid people will buy it, and nobody will notice. And yeah, there's always cause and effect, isn't there?
Yeah, there always is. And you know, I would say just keep your eyes open, use your best judgment. You can usually kind of see a snake oil salesman. Um, look at what they've produced themselves, and see if you respect it. I mean, that's my main thing, I guess.
Hmm.
I will take a class from or a workshop from anybody I respect. I see horror writers teaching courses all the time. I teach courses at Peninsula College. I teach 3 courses on horror writing and publishing and indie
Hmm.
publishing. So, I'm certainly not like hammering anybody for teaching a course. Like, if you know what you're talking about, you have something to offer to the writing community, and you make your money from this, you're a professional. That's great. Like, it's certainly not a crime to charge for a course. I'm not saying that, but you should never hammer somebody for giving away free writing tips. That's bullshit, and
Yeah,
you are scum if you do
yeah.
that.
What the fuck?
Jane Friedman does that. So why don't you go
Hmm.
talk shit to Jane Friedman, and then come back to me with it, see what she says, because her blog is all that. Like
Hmm.
she has awesome books that go more in depth to the content. Like The Business of Being a Writer is one of my favorite books on publishing. But like she also has this blog where she shares that stuff every single week, like awesome writing tips with huge like examples and books you can read and reference sites, and like that's she's generous with her time and with her professional energy and with her knowledge. And I think that's all of our duty as anybody who's made it anywhere in this industry. Like, help other people out, be the tide that floats all ships. Like, don't be an asshole. Fuck
Yeah,
that.
look, what is it to you? And do you know what? If
Yeah.
somebody comes to me and I help them out with something and they take off, so be it. Not fair play to them. I
Yeah.
don't I don't see the problem.
No.
It's on me to get myself better.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one way I am never going to do that is by holding somebody else down. Fuck that. That is disgusting.
Exactly.
That's if people come get involved and they take off and they end up, start a YouTube channel, end up with 100,000 subscribers. Fucking fair play to you. You nailed it. I'm
Yeah.
happy. I'm happy you came in contact with me at some time, or if I said something that helped someone and they did it, great. I
Hmm.
get something out of that. Seeing people. I love seeing people that say I can't do, all of a sudden realizing they can. I don't know. It's always been a thing with mine, being able to
Mine,
just.
me too. That's
It's
my favorite.
taking somebody that maybe has confidence and they don't think they've got the ability, they've got the talent, but they're just getting in their own way, and just
Yeah.
a few kind words, and all of a sudden they're soaring, and you're just like, see, you could do it. Brilliant, fair play to you. And then it's up
Yeah.
to them how far they go.
Absolutely. And that's something I love about being in the creative industry, like now on a professional level, is it doesn't feel like I've worked in other sales departments.
Mhm.
I have done sales as a job. I've done lots of different random jobs. This isn't somewhere where we have to be in competition with each other. We can all be on, we are all on the same team, because at the end of the day, like, it's really not us against each other. There's no, it's not a sports situation where we have to, like, if I don't outsell you, Colin, then like you do better than me or whatever. Like, it's not, that isn't like how it works. We
Yeah,
can both
bookshelf can
sell
hold more than one
really
book.
well. Yeah, exactly. Every and like, I don't know. I've always been more of the mind of like, oh, if you don't like my book, cool. I'm going to send you to my friend's book who you have expressed a certain interest or something that it sounds like you like. Luciano's book over there about werewolves better than my book.
Mhm.
You should go check that out. Like, go buy someone else's horror. The more people are reading horror and stuff, the better it is for me at the end of the day. Like, we just need to demonstrate the expanse and the breadth of the genre as it's continuing to grow and diversify. We're in an awesome time right now to be horror creators. So it's never been a better time to just like help that tide rise, float all the ships. Like, don't be that asshole
Yeah.
out there pushing people
Talking of
down.
which, the course is that multi-genre?
Yes, it is. Richard Thomas primarily lives in the dark fiction realm,
Mhm.
kind of literary dark fiction or horror, noir, crime stuff. But that course we are doing the best American short stories, so that's like literary, the best science fiction and fantasy, and then the best horror of the year by Ellen Datlow.
Oh,
So
because
we're
I was
going
going to
through all
ask
those.
how your experience in that sort of multi-genre, being a horror creator, how's the reaction? But if it's
Oh
more
yeah.
geared towards that, then is it?
Well, no, and I've had different experiences. This is a kind of like horror first group, and we're all also doing other stuff. So it's
Mhm.
the opposite of most groups I've been in. And I can see you're smiling there because I think you've had a similar experience. But I've been in lots of
Yep.
critique groups where I am the only horror person. I've been to a couple workshops where I'm the only horror person. In fact, that's far more common than to come in and be like, everybody does horror here. Usually
Yeah,
there's
you're
one
like,
or two of
what?
us in the
What?
corner that
Yeah.
are like, yeah, exactly.
The
Um,
bodies.
and you have to find each other. And then the nice thing about that is you have instant camaraderie. But you can always tell because those horror authors are usually the ones that are lurking in the shadows somewhere. Well, uh,
They're usually
fantasy and
having more fun.
sci-fi. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Who is partying the hardest? That is often the other horror writer.
Yeah. No, just I've been in like marketing. I'm trying to learn marketing because it's horrendous.
Oh yeah,
I
have
hate
fun
it.
with that.
I hate marketing language. I hate adverts. I hate the whole thing.
Hmm.
It's anathema to me.
Yeah, it's
And
terrible.
yeah, I'm turning up in some of these things. I'm the only horror creator, and it's like, oh,
Yep.
even years ago, I was starting, try and learn that sort of thing, and social media algorithms, so forth, and being the only horror creator is like, are you going to kill my babies? I'm like, well, if it gives me good internet connection and helps some streams, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, the internet gods, like we
Yep,
said. But we don't want to do that
yeah,
necessarily. It's
what they
effort.
require.
Yeah, it's not. We don't make the rules. We just obey them
That's
blindly.
uh, that's
But yeah,
uh, that's one thing actually from your website. Yeah, I love your sense of humor. Like you even bring that onto your website, which is great. Do you think there's an element, and I've seen this as well with horror creators too, this thing that's sneaked in. A lot of people are taking themselves way too seriously.
oh
Like
yeah.
they're giving no room for anyone else. If somebody takes themselves too seriously, leave no room for anybody else to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just so uptight. And that is to me anathema to the horror genre for a start.
Mm-hmm.
Because the horror genre is irreverent. It is inappropriate humor. It's boobies. It's blood. It's guts. It's everything that's wrong. That's the whole fun of it. Is exploring the wrongness of the world and society and other
Mm-hmm.
worlds. It doesn't stop just this realm. It goes all over.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
where do you think where's that come from?
You know, I don't know where it comes from, but I agree with you, Colin. I just think we're cut from the same cloth in a lot of these issues. But my motto for that has always been uh, take the craft seriously. I'm a really big proponent of that. Like, and we've
Mhm.
talked about this already, but like, if you're gonna put your work in the world, especially if you're indie, you kind of owe it to all of us indie people to like put out a good product, because every time a bad indie product goes out, everybody's like belief that indie is lesser than traditional publishing just gets reaffirmed. So like, indie people, please get edits, like do the work. You owe it to all of us. We're all in this together. We can make indie awesome, but we have to do it together. So take the craft seriously, and that doesn't mean you have to write super serious stories. There are
Mhm.
hilarious stories that are really poignant and really powerful and really important. Cabin in the Woods is one of my favorite movies of all time,
Absolutely, that's
and
brilliant.
it's fucking brilliant. And they get a lot of strong messages across, but they embrace fully that irreverence that you're referring to, of like they very much know what they are. Tucker and Dale versus Evil is a great movie. The Edgar Wright Cornetto movies are great. And those are all funny. Douglas Adams is some of the best literature ever written, in my opinion. But like, you don't have to write it. It doesn't have to be this deep, serious drama. It can be, but the point is you taking the craft seriously. You're really doing the work and you're writing a good story, and your story matters to you. That matters.
Mhm.
Don't take yourself seriously. You're just a monkey that has sentience. Like, don't be an asshole. Like,
Yeah,
you as a creator, you're not a genius. You're not any better than anybody else. There's a couple people out there who maybe are actual geniuses. But
third tip of the pyramid.
they're top of the pyramid, and mostly they aren't assholes. Actually, most of the ones that I've met, because usually they had to do the work for a very long time before anyone else realized they were even a genius. A good example of that to me is like Stephen Graham Jones.
Mhm.
He's written like thousands of short stories, and people are kind of like, now he's like really, really big, but he hasn't been for most of his career, despite the fact that he's been publishing in every magazine and he's been writing like 2 novels a year. And he's a very humble, cool dude.
Yep. I would
Um,
say Guy Smith had a
mm,
strange genius to him. Like his stuff is just you're going, what the hell? But
yeah,
it's compelling, and you pick up the next one, you pick up the next one, and you're like, no, there's like a mad genius going on with that sort of stuff. You don't become even after death having a. He has a convention held to him every year in a leisure center,
yeah, that's
like a
awesome.
big grotty leisure center in Wales, but it's like a mecca. Everyone goes to it. It's
Nice,
you
that's
don't do that
awesome.
without having like a mad genius to it. But once again, that irreverence of not taking themselves too seriously. Um,
Right,
how do you keep
but
yourself? How do you hold yourself in balance?
oh, well, I mean, I
I
don't
just have
have a
the old
huge
head.
following, so it's pretty easy. um, I I don't know. I just try to live by that mantra I was just describing. I try to take the work seriously, but not myself. I try to stay pretty self-aware. Um, I mean, we all have imposter syndrome, and we all get humbled pretty regularly in this business. You can put out a book and you're going to get good reviews, you're going to get bad reviews, and you kind of just have to make your peace with that. All your work is going to be received subjectively on some level anyway.
Mhm.
So to me, I just see it as, here's another mantra. I like mantras, Colin, in case you haven't figured this out yet. But another mantra for me comes from another awesome indie creator, Johnny B. Truant, Sean Platt. I don't know if you know them, the Sterling and Stone guys.
No,
But
not familiar with them.
they're awesome. They've written a lot of really good stuff, all across different genres. They were really big in the ebook revolution back in like the 2012s era. But they wrote a book called Write, Publish, Repeat. It's one of my favorite indie writing books. Highly recommend it. It's got a great audiobook too. That it's very funny and very informative. Lots of evergreen advice. But the one thing they said in there is, when your book isn't finished, it's art. As soon as it's finished and wrapped in a cover, it's a product. And I like looking at it that way, because to
Mhm.
me, I just treat it like art until I feel like I have done that all the way through. Sometimes that takes years. Sometimes it takes a couple days. It depends. Short stories sometimes just like really fly out of me, and sometimes I have to work on them for a couple weeks and take them to 6 critique group sessions, and like sometimes I take them to one and then the group likes it and I send it to a magazine and it gets published. You just
Mhm.
never know. And then, like with my novella Crevasse, that took 2 years. That was my first fully completed, like long form project. But I wrote book 2 in that series pretty quickly, and now I'm just editing it. So it's it's all subjective, it's all different. But I think the most important thing is just, for me, it's that mantra of that helps keep me in balance of like, this is art right now. It'll become a product when I wrap it in a cover. But regardless, like I'm just trying to focus on doing the work. And then when it comes to myself, I just try to stay humble, try to be honest, try to be transparent about what my journeys looked like and what my opinions are, without being a douche about it ever. And
Mhm.
I'm sure sometimes I still fail at that, but I try to be as douche as little as possible, and
Sometimes
that's
you'll have
generally good
bad
advice.
days, or somebody rubs you up the wrong way, and you just react, and that's it. It's but
Sure.
there's a difference between having a bad day and having a consistent personality a certain way, and that's where I think the people that do less are the vocal ones that are always sniping. I've noticed
Yeah,
lately
I
on
can see
X,
that.
because once your feed starts showing you certain things, and obviously because of put out publishing in the authors, all of a sudden you're seeing all these people, and all they do is whine and
Yeah,
cry, and
there's a
you're
lot of
like,
that.
I wrote 100 words today. Why is nobody picking me up? I'm querying. That word querying now has become real bone of contention, because that's all you see in people's bios: querying, querying. And like,
Hmm.
oh, piss off! Just do the work. Do something. Fucking get off this. If you're standing all day going, no one know me like me, you're not.
Hmm.
Fucking do the work. Worry about people liking you later. Fucking put the stuff out there. Put it out in the universe, and you don't know what'll happen, or you might just find out you're not good at it, and that's fair enough too.
Yeah.
Or it's not working, that's also fine. At least you're trying. There's more people that won't try, that won't even get off that thing. So you're already, by trying and putting something out there, you're already ahead of the curve.
Hmm.
That's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, it's true. People love to commiserate, though. People love to gossip. People love to wallow together. I think that's another relatively intrinsically human thing. I mean,
Misery
you
loves
work
company.
at what's that?
Misery loves company.
Absolutely. And that's, writing can be a pretty lonely place, can be a pretty lonely gig sometimes. So I think a lot of that is just people looking for commiseration, that misery company. But
Mm.
I totally agree with you. It's just all about doing the work. Complaining will get you nowhere. Everybody's gone through the same thing. And I do think you're right. Like, the more people start to publish, I think you often see a little bit less that kind of stuff coming across. And it's hard to. I mean, the social media is a tough place for new writers, especially because you're always seeing people with publishing announcements, and it's hard not to compare yourself to these authors that seem to be having success.
Mhm.
But just keep in mind that behind the scenes, it's not like, oh, I get this publishing announcement. I get a new publishing announcement every week.
Magic
Most of
wand
that has,
thing. Yep.
yeah, most of that has been culminating for years and years and years, and over hundreds and hundreds of stories and tons of rejections. I mean, Stephen King went through thousands of rejections before he was picked up. It's just the way it is. And I get rejected every story I've ever sent out has gotten rejected at least 4 or 5 times before it's got accepted, you know?
Mhm.
That's not an uncommon occurrence. So, and I've never been picked up. I don't have an agent. I've never been picked up out of the query trenches. I spent a little time in there, and ultimately, probably like you, was just sort of like, I think I'm just going to do my own thing for a while, get better at this, put some stuff out in the world, do the work. And maybe I'll try the query trenches again someday when I have a novel that I feel like would really sell. But when I do that, I'm going to do that knowing I made this choice to go this path. Like, I know there's other paths. So maybe
Yeah.
that's the key too. Like, this isn't your only path. You don't have to take it. So, like, if you choose to take it, just be ready to do the work, because it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So
And
that's something to keep in mind.
and being picked up isn't necessarily the best thing either, because then you're locked into a contract, like a 3-book contract, and
Yeah.
then you're basically you're under the thumb because you got to produce that goods within that time and be to their standard. So
Yep.
my motivation for doing this is actually I've worked in the corporate world for
Yeah.
decades. I don't want a boss anymore.
Yep.
I'm
Absolutely.
too brash a personality. I have a dark sense of humor. Irreverent. You know, um, I'll respect rank, etc. But at the same time, I'm not going to bow down with somebody because they have a title, because it's never been my thing. I'm a problem solver. I'm not about politics, and that covers office politics, workplace politics, just that whole politicking of schmoozing with the right people just to keep yourself safe, because the people that do that usually are least productive. That's not me. I just want to get my head down and do things. And if it
Hmm.
doesn't succeed, then it's 100% on me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm happier. I'm working longer than ever.
Yep.
I really am. If I was just doing a job, flip sake, it'd be easy. You just clock off and you forget about it. But
Yep.
that's not how I'm built. And yeah, financially, yeah, I'm less well off, but so be it. I'm freer. The energy I'm putting in is for me and mine, because I consider my team. When people come on board of a responsibility, sure, yourself as well. If you've put together an anthology, it's not about you.
Yeah.
You take authors' work, even though you remunerate them for it. You still have a sense of responsibility of this
Hmm.
person needs to know they've made the right bet by coming on board my team, and
Yeah.
you sort of have that on your shoulders as well. But I find that energizing as opposed to holding me down. Don't know how you feel about that with sort of creating an anthology and taking people on. Tell me about your process.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I love this collaborative nature of that. I love being able to, like you said, kind of choose the stories that resonate with me, the stories that I believe in, and then I love that editing process too. I love going back and forth with the authors, trying to take those stories and elevate them to the highest level we can together, and then putting them all together, figuring out the order. It's Anthologies are like have kind of become my favorite form of publishing, honestly.
Mhm.
um and there's so many different ways to go about it. I mean, I've got this 3 book deal now with a small press, which I really prefer, at least for this stage in my career. Because like you were kind of saying, once you get if you get a big publisher, you never know, like that they might want to rewrite your book quite a bit. You'll get no say in the cover. There's so many levels of like removal you have to have, after you get to that. You really have to then embrace this is now a product
Mhm.
mindset, because and if it doesn't sell, like that book's like you're never going to earn out your royalties, and then you probably never get another book deal with that person, potentially, like will be a lot harder. Um so there's like all those layers to it. When you go indie or you go small press, you have a lot more say, you have a lot more control, but you get a little less like marketing help and stuff, obviously, and you don't get a big advance or anything. But for me, the process of like creating anthologies is just that, it's what we've been talking about the whole show. It's just that ability to like bring on stories that you believe in, bring in and work and collaborate with authors on a whole nother level, where you're like working together to create this cool end product. Because again, it's a way to make writing a lot less lonely too.
Mhm.
Um, and you kind of get to combine your powers. Like one of the things I love most about anthologies is because I read a ton of short stories, and I slush read for a couple magazines and I edit for Grendel Press. And there's so many good authors out there that nobody will ever hear of, um, and so like being a part of trying to spread the word about these other authors, and getting them into your anthology so that when you sell that book at a farmer's market or whatever, I do a lot of that.
Mhm.
I'm not only getting my work out there and my name, but also like I can really promote these other authors that I believe in, and that's become a favorite part of the process for me as well.
Can you quantify? I'm finding it difficult to find words. Um, I say an anthology has a certain voice,
Hmm. Hmm.
and a story either fits in with that voice or it doesn't. And you sort of know within 3 or 4 stories what the voice of the anthology is going to be. Do you use a similar terminology, or do you have a particular way that you view the finished product, how it's going to look or read, or how do you know what's going to fit or what doesn't?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would find it hard to quantify as well, but I agree with you that everything has a voice. And there's few editing formats more subjective than the anthology, I think, because one editor is taking like a bunch of work from everybody, and ultimately we're gonna like the kind of stories that we like. So like for me, I think most of my anthologies are going to end up being kind of a psychological bent, usually heavy on the supernatural and paranormal as opposed to like the human monster. And always kind of leaning into that more minimalist storytelling, character centric, as opposed to world centric, with the
Mhm.
story at the heart of everything rather than maybe the thematic elements as much as at the heart. Obviously, it's very awesome when everything can tie in, but those are the things that I look for the most. So mine are going to be like psychological, supernatural, character driven stories. Um, in any anthology I produce. And
Mhm.
that's because I'm an editor. I'm the editor. So those are like the stories that I am really attracted to and drawn to. So naturally, they're going to float to the top of the pile for me. So I think that's bound to happen. And you will see that in if you read any like collections from the same editors. Like, for example, I've read several
Mhm.
things from Crystal Lake, and there's a reason John Durgan is in a bunch of those. It's because Joe Meinert loves John Durgan's work. And there's consistent authors that get into Nightmare a lot, and you can kind of tell, like, oh, this is what Wendy Wagner really likes. So there's definitely that level of voice and preference that kind of overrides any anthology, I think.
So
Um,
here's the question. This is one I've had to think about before even starting this myself. How do you not fall into the trap of just going with what you know? And how do you make room for new people? Because that's one thing I'm very conscious of, that I don't just have. It's like what I do after every anthology releases, I have a celebration stream. So I get the authors on board and we just eat
oh, cool.
shoot the shit for an hour, or two, and just geek out. It's funny when you get new people and they're like, these are a bunch of nerds. Oh my God. you know? But that's me bringing the face to the name. But I'm starting to see already same faces, and I don't want to give that impression myself that I'm only
Hmm.
this is my little clique. That's all I'm interested in. How do you do that? How do you fight against that? That you're always leaving room for new people, but you know what you like.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that is hard, especially when like similar names come across your desk time and again. I've definitely had that now that I'm on like the Grendel Press submissions, specifically. I had a few of the authors that submitted to Bad Spirits submitted to that,
Mhm.
and like we were talking earlier in the show, they obviously just sort of like subconsciously float to the top of the pile. You're going to read those stories all the way through and give them maybe a little more of a shot than one that like it turns you off on the first paragraph and then you're like, eh, I've already read 90 stories today. That one's sometimes that happens.
Mhm.
um, Another thing to know, if you're in the query trenches, you might just happen to have caught the editor when they didn't have lunch that day or something. And that happens. So don't feel too bad about rejections. They happen for so a myriad of reasons. And that sucks. Shouldn't be that way, but it is. Everybody's human. Um, I think I do, and yeah, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you don't want to also like be extra harsh on this person you've published before, because
Yeah,
you're now kind of like, ah, well, if I'm going to
you're
publish you again,
overcompensating, and then
yeah.
you're doing the wrong. It's not for the right reason because something in the back of your head's going, "Oh, I must not," and then you do that as well. No, it's this is this is the thing I've come across, and I just find it's interesting to hear your perspective, seeing you're in the same boat. It's good to
Yeah.
have somebody to talk to about it. It's also good to let people understand, the human side behind all this, because I think people see, once again, even small press publishers, this faceless entity,
Yeah. Yeah.
soulless, faceless, harsh, must
Just
be
another
perfect.
rejection.
Yep. You haven't done these 10 courses, so you don't even get to submit here. That it's amazing how perceptions,
Yeah.
without any help, like myths and rumors and urban legends, they just spring up and they become more popular than actual reality because it's more exciting to think that, and it's easier. Oh, that person, they just hate me because blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then I
And I
can
can
make myself
say,
feel better.
and I could say a couple of like concrete things because we're doing a lot of meandering kind of, which is the way we both sort of like to chat, I think.
Yeah.
And the way I generally do look at things is pretty like philosophical in nature, but a couple concrete things that have actually helped with my anthologies in recent years. Blind submissions are helpful because that does take that name thing out of it. So like I like now to get I'll obviously have a name when they submit, so it's on their submission form, so I have that
Mhm.
info for the back when I'm actually producing it. But then I will take all the stories and just download them, and I ask them not to put their name on the story. So I don't really remember who wrote what by the time I'm reading it, and then that could be pretty helpful for me to not pick people based on name. And then another thing that's been really helpful for me with the Crypticon writing contest I do every year
Mhm.
is the we have a judges panel now, and that's been huge. I got 3 judges that come on board this year. And the prior year I had done it all by myself. Um, and 2 stories got into the contest that I would have never picked. And I think that was for the best because if 3 other readers like it and I necessarily, maybe it was like an 8, like in the top 10 for me, it was 8 instead of 5 to win
Yep.
in the contest. But they all put it somewhere in the top 5, then that to me moved it up to the top 5. And it was helpful to kind of have that burden of the entire choice taken off my shoulders, but also to realize, that there's places where these other 3 people's opinions that I respect align. And so there's something I'm missing. And that means I'm probably missing that for an audience perspective too, on some level. So it was
Mhm.
helpful to have some extra help just for some concrete answer to that question.
Yep, and that's good as well. Once again, it's back to the checks and balances, isn't it?
Hmm.
If you want to be a rounded person, if you don't want to be an egomaniac, then you have to have that built in. And that's
Yep.
just by putting yourself in situations where you're not the authoritative voice of the final word, that collaboration, I think it's something in particular the horror genre does better than any other genre is collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah. There's great collaboration, great community in this genre for sure. Without question.
Yeah, and it gives a whole different energy to everything. Where, like I said, the worst is probably comedy or romance. The nice genres, everyone's stabbing each other in the back, and because they're all like wizards in the tower.
Yeah, that funny you'll see that meme floating around of like horror writers are all sunshine and rainbows off the page, and that there is a lot of truth to that. Some of the happiest people I've ever met have been at horror conventions, and I'm going to StokerCon next year, so next week I mean. So I'm very excited to go see all my horror peeps because StokerCon's
Talking
always a
about
good
it, a couple
time.
of weeks ago, I was talking to Mark Allen, and yeah, it was when we got into the conversation. He mentioned he was part of the Seattle Horror Writers Association. I'm like, oh yeah, we know them guys. We work all the time, and it was one of them sort of moments. It wasn't planned. It was just like, oh right. All of a sudden, and then I'm starting to ask him like, oh, did somebody introduce you? He's like, no, just found you. I'm like, all right, okay, small world, great.
Nice. That's even better.
Yeah, it's just randomly, you bump into people, and then the whole, the whole you're connected by everybody in the world by 7 people sort
Hmm.
of trope. I love that. You just don't know who you're going to meet just by putting yourself out there. That's another thing I actually want to talk about. This thing we both do, and obviously we're quite comfortable with. It's a major barrier to authors. They don't seem to want to come on and talk, and they think just putting out their book is enough. Is it enough in today's world to do that?
No.
Yeah,
I don't I don't know
easy
how much
answer,
more
isn't
to
it?
say about that, but
Okay, so let's put upon it. What do you say to people who are reticent about coming on the podcasts, or like there's people that didn't turn up the last stream, didn't even say anything, and you're like, well, you know, I mean, they're letting themselves down. But it's like, if you're nervous or something, talk to me. But what do you say to people that are not comfortable about doing this, and what it means to their writing career?
yeah, I truly, and we talked about this a little with conventions earlier, but and that was kind of coming off that class discussion where we're talking about should you spend a bunch of money on these courses, and if you want to learn and like it's a good course, yeah, it's worth your money. But you know what's, to me, what's worth the money more than any course, at least has been for my career, what is to go to conventions. Like that's where you talk to people. And by the way, conventions are full of courses. That's what panels are. They are courses
Mhm.
with professionals. And then at the end you get to actually in person ask that person a question. Now, if you're immunocompromised or you don't like to go to big public things, I totally understand that. I'm not saying this is the only path. Nothing is the only path. But for my career, the most helpful thing, period, bar none, has been to go around and to meet people, because not only does that like get people to know you personally, say you're going to submit to them later or something, but it also like just spreads word of mouth. Like overall, I don't think, and especially in this day of like oversaturation, and the threshold of oversaturation is only going to get higher with AI. There's going to be thousands of stories out there all the time. There already are, but now it's only going to be more. Um, so and I'm a firm believer that people buy artists, not art.
Mhm.
They do buy art, if, but again, they're kind of like most of the time they're more interested in who wrote the book. Most readers I know, most readers I've met in person, and when I get the word of mouth, they are maybe interested in the concept of the book, but the thing that will push them over to buying the book is seeing if they think the writer is an interesting person or a cool person, and somebody that they want to support monetarily. You're asking people to buy a book, and then you're asking them to spend the amount of time it takes to read a book with
Mhm.
you and with your ideas. So they want to like you as a person. And I think you're way more likely to sell more books if they know who you are as a person. Um, and if people know who you are as a person, they will buy your book whether they even know what it's about or not, a lot of the time, because they like you and they want to support you. They want to support artists. People love supporting artists. People love art, and they want to keep it alive. They want it to prosper, but they have to know who you are.
Yeah.
And it does everything for your sales. And like if you're getting invited on a podcast, don't let imposter syndrome talk you out of going on that pod. You've already been invited, so like you're already wanted there.
You're
Um,
scared away. You're ahead of the curve, aren't you? You're like,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's, and you're coming on with someone like me or Colin, like we're just book geeks. Like nobody pays us $1 million to do this shit. We do it because we love it. We pay more money
It
into
costs
it.
us money to bloody do this
Yeah, it
stuff. Yeah.
costs us money. Like we are doing this because we are super passionate about it. We love it. And if we invite you on our podcast, we fucking want you on our podcast. Like we could invite a lot of people. So like if you get invited and you're nervous about coming on, that's perfectly okay. It can be nerve wracking to perform and everything, but just know you're probably in the right company. I can't think of a single podcast in this industry, in the horror writing industry, that like their mission is to grill people or make people look
Yeah.
bad. Nobody I know does that. And if you're worried about what the show's going to be like, just watch a few episodes. And if you don't want to come on, then don't, because of how the show works or whatever. It's not your vibe. That's fine too. Like these are your choices. But if you're getting invited, like you've already done three-quarters of the work, then you just have to show up and be yourself and be a book nerd, because that's usually who ththese people running podcasts are.
Do you think, is it this old trope from like I don't know, Victorian times, or 60s? Now, I'm an artist, and they have to put on this, like,
Sure.
mainstream media, like they're all performers. They're not artists, they're performers.
Yeah.
They get told what to do, and they all come on, the dress a certain way, and blah 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 blah. Do you think there's an expectation that people think they have to be like that?
I don't know.
What it,
And I am going to push back that performers are not artists. That is bullshit, my friend.
well,
Actor, I definitely know
if
a
you're an
lot of
artist,
performers.
you're actively creating your own material.
Gotcha.
If you're a
Gotcha.
performer, you're doing what the trend is, or you're just following direction. That's the
It's a different
difference.
art form. It's a different art form. I
So, for example, a dancer is not an artist because they're just following the dance moves. They're following the structure. The choreographer is an artist. Now, you can be
I see.
both. Like
That's an
the
interesting
lines can
perspective
blur.
on
Like
it.
once again, let's not go binary. That's the worst thing. I hate that. There's no if buts.
Yeah,
You can
yeah, yeah,
always
yeah.
cross over,
No
but
binary.
primarily a performer is, and you see it on YouTube as well. You know the ones that are trend chasers and everything else, and they just want to talk about whatever's popular, and they don't actually have a thought in their own head. They'll pick up the buzzwords and they'll just say it, and they'll go on this and look at the chat shows, legacy media chat shows. They've got the
Sure,
fake
sure.
smile. They just say the same and the end stuff. Like you can't tell the difference between one interview and the next because you're not getting to know anybody. Like that stuff's all old hat. But
Okay, I can agree with you then. For me, the thing is like performers are definitely artists. That is an art form to learn how to bring your own energy and your own ability and your own skill and translate somebody else's say words or dance moves. But that is bringing a huge amount of yourself to the piece, like a real artist, like a real professional dancer who's doing it at like on the Broadway level or something. Like they worked with their choreographer, they did a lot of collaboration, probably with the writer and the director as well. So like they're bringing a lot of themselves to it. They are creating something new that would not be there without them. But I agree, that's the difference, right, between an artist and somebody who's just like taking what was made for them and throwing it onto a different media format,
mhm.
like stock and wrote. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't clarified, but like I said, it just there's a massive distinction. You will see it here in this sphere as well, and you see it with the trend chasers and writers, and that's why indie writers get a bad name.
Hmm.
You see the ones and oh, this is the popular thing right now, and they'll use AI or they'll
Ugh.
plagiarize other people's work and they'll just fire it out there, and
Yeah.
they're absolute shithouses. Have no time for them, but it's part of human condition. It's always going to be people like that.
Yep. That's
You
true.
know, and that's always going to be. It's always been part of creation, entertainment, business, you name it. There's always been those type of you go to the workplace and that shyster that takes up space and resources and they can't get sacked for some reason. They never leave and they just give you a headache every day by being there in your space.
Yep. Yep.
There's
Uh,
always going to be those people. What I'm trying to do is, explain to people that you don't have to be like that.
yeah.
If you want to be taken seriously, don't be like that. You don't have to. There's other ways.
I agree.
And you
And
don't have
and
to
I
let
would
those people rule you.
and to tie that back into the chat about, coming on podcasts or going to conventions and putting yourself out there as a person, um, I would just say you're generally among your people in the creative industry, because anybody who's like working hard enough at this to get published consistently, to go to StokerCon, um, like to pay the money to go to conventions, like that's an investment
Mhm.
in the craft, So you're like sort of already by and large, you're going to be amongst your own people. So I feel like it's also a place where we can really be genuine, and you don't have to like put on any persona or any kind of mask. You can come and just be a horror nerd. And you can be even a subgenre horror nerd. Like you will find the people who not only like horror, but who
Mhm.
like slashers, who like
Yep.
isolation slashers, who like going even further down some weird subgenre funnel. And then you can nerd out about that till like 4 a.m. That's how I got to know like TJ Price. Um, and so I would say definitely like just try to keep that in mind. Like if even if you're antisocial and you don't like being in big crowds and stuff, I understand that. But like keep in mind that this is like a party that is specifically for you. If you are a horror nerd, like horror conventions are for you
And
and
there's
you will
different
meet your
sizes of
people.
conventions as well.
Yeah, yeah, true,
There's
true.
smaller ones, there's larger ones. So you don't have to go to like MegaCon or something,
Right.
first time out. Like
First
that would be a
one.
bit silly.
Yeah, and there's film centric ones, there's
Mhm.
writing centric ones, there's ones that are kind of a hybrid, there's cosplay centric ones. Like Crypticon Seattle is one I'm heavily involved in, where I do the programming for the writing track and the writing contest anthology every year. But that's that's one where it's like, it used to be a film festival, but now we have a lot more writing stuff. So now it's kind of both. There's lots of cosplay, there's a big parties, there's also like open mic readings if you don't like the party. So like it's there's stuff out there for you. You just have to find the right stuff. And if you see like a pro is going to a convention and you can afford it and you're near enough to it, like go there and learn from the pro that you admire, and you probably get a chance to meet them, you know, especially if it's not one of those conventions with like a VIP rope off situation or something like that. Most
Yeah,
writing ones don't have that.
no, that's all sort of mainstream, isn't it? That's
Yeah, that's
that's
way more mainstream. More of the film ones or Comic
yeah.
Con or the big ones. Yeah.
Just to go off tangent here, talk to me about the greatest enemy. That one caught my eye.
The greatest anime?
Yeah, enemy. Uh, Ishiro
Oh, the
Tamiyagi,
greatest
your story.
enemy.
The greatest
Oh,
enemy,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, that is off topic. That's an older one.
Mhm.
So that was from my very first collection. And it was one of my first stories that was published by somebody else. It was published by they were a little bit like Royal Road, but they were kind of trying to do it for dark fantasy. They were called Simile. I think
Mhm.
they've gone belly up since, which you know happens with small online zines and stuff. Um, but I did this just like I'm still doing. I love like prompts and challenges for myself. Those are motivating for me to write short stories consistently. So the first collection I ever did was called Blue Rare, and it was I did a thing called Cryptic Cage Match. So I would take two comparable monsters, and then I would say to the internet, you know, which of these two monsters would win in a fight. And then whatever they chose, I would write a story about that monster. So I did that for a year, one story a month. And that was where Blue Rare came from.
Mhm.
Greatest Enemy. I'm a huge Japanese history buff. I took a whole semester on it in college, and I actually have like a Bushido tattoo. But I wanted to write a samurai story, and one of the monsters that I put out for Cryptic Cage Match was the shojo, which is like a Japanese alcohol spirit.
Mhm.
Um, and I always kind of like do my own little twists on the folklore stuff I explore. And but I, you know, I also definitely try to do all my homework and everything. So the greatest enemy is a shojo story. It's about a samurai. Well, he's a ronin now because he's kind of been released from his former lord, and he's a pretty bad dude. But he's in a relationship with a woman who wants to save him. And one of these sort of like shojo mythologies that I was able to find was that you can drink the liquor of a shojo. If you're a good person, it will have a really profound and positive effect on you. And if you are a bad person, it will have a very, very bad effect on you. So I kind of took that, and um, when he drinks the liquor of the shojo, he starts to have the wounds that he's inflicted on people throughout his life
Mhm.
start to get inflicted upon him. And then unless he's going to repent, he you know, and like come to terms with the bad things he's done and try to become a better person as she hopes he will from this, he's going to die. And then I also laced it with some haiku and stuff. I had a lot of fun with that one.
Oh, cool. Sounds interesting. So is that still available?
Yeah, it's still available.
Okay, we'll have to.
It's in Blue Rare, the collection, and then I
Mhm.
think you can actually read it right on the website still. But I don't know if actually Simile went down, so it's probably might be a dead link at this point.
All right, might have a.
But yeah, it's in my Blue Rare collection. If you really want to read it, that's on Amazon.
Oh, cool. Right, and so most importantly, let's talk about Rain Shadows. And so this is, I think we were talking before we went live. There, just similar to Horrific Tales. You've based this off the podcast, and you're doing something a little bit different with it. Do you want to explain the sort of concept behind it and how it's working?
Yeah,
What,
totally.
more importantly, what the audience need to do to keep along with the story?
Yeah, definitely. So it all started in 2023, late 2023. I approached my critique partner and fellow Washington writer, Tamara K. Selman. She's a writer I have tremendous respect for. She's been in the industry for like 30 years. She's really, really good dark fiction writer and fantasy writer. Um, I approached her with this idea because like you and I have been talking about this whole show, but I have a big part of my mission is to help writers break into something, not necessarily traditional publishing or whatever, just to break into the writing industry in the way that works for them. And I think that all starts with like learning how to finish stories and how to like start that editing process on the right foot, with like a good critique group, decent beta readers, and finding the right editor, things like that. But I do really think like a solid critique group and a couple people you can bounce stories back and forth with each other and get honest, solid, usable, useful feedback is the most important thing you can find as a new writer. And Tamara and I met in a critique group, so she came right to my top of my mind for a perfect partner for this. Pitched it to her, and we came up with this idea. So each we decided to write a collection over the course of a year. Each month, one person would bring a prompt, the other person would write a story to it, and then we would swap. And we did that every month for a year. So we each wrote 6 stories, and they all culminated in this book. On the podcast Beneath the Rain Shadow, we would, at the end of the month, we would meet for an episode, and every episode we showed our edits and we shared our rough drafts with the world, which is a very scary thing to do.
Oh yeah, especially when something's still in concept. Bloody hell, that's
yeah, it was a wild idea, but we did it because we wanted people to see that like how important it is to just finish the story, and that all rough drafts suck. Like all first drafts suck. That doesn't matter who the writer is. Stephen King's first drafts sucked, and he will tell you that in On Writing. Like you have to finish the story though, because you can't fix anything that's not on the page, and you can fix everything that is on the page. So we would bring the stories, the rough drafts, the very raw, and we would critique them live on the show. So we did that all year for each story that's in this book now. You can go back and see what it looked like as a rough draft and what the very, very first edit of it looked like. So that was kind of the concept of the Beneath the Rain Shadow podcast. It was both motivating for writing a story a month for each of us, and then also for, hopefully inspiring new writers, showing them that like, yeah, it might look really bad as a rough draft, but over the course of a year, you're editing it, you're critiquing it, you're bouncing it off your people, you're doing the work. You'll come out with a good story that you're proud of at the end. So hopefully people can come away with something.
I'm guessing you'd recommend people read the book first, then go back to the podcast.
Well, we did the podcast first, so it's totally up to you. At this point, I think it would be more fun to read the book first, because then you can go.
It's almost like the director's commentary in a movie, isn't it? You watch the movie first, then you go back and watch the director's commentary to see how it got there.
Exactly. And the podcast itself is very much a craft podcast. It's not like Fermented Fiction, where we're goofing around and talking about movies and shows. It's a pretty deep dive into like critiquing why we make the choices we make as both writers and editors, and going into kind of all the nuts and bolts of how a good critique works, and then applying that directly to these rough draft stories. So it's very much an exploration of story and editing and early writing process, but through our own work right there on the page. So I think it was a lot of fun. And if you enjoy learning about the writing craft and want to improve, it's totally free, and you can go check it out, because we don't charge $6,000 for the advice that we can give.
Oh, obviously Clay's link to his webpage, which has everything, takes you everywhere you need to go, is in the description. Oh, there's Chris on. Great concept, real-time feedback. Yeah, it is. That is like you're really putting yourself. I have to say, massive hats off to you for doing that.
Thanks.
No, because you really are. I think when you've got a concept and you're not too sure about it, you're still like, I'll have something that'll be weeks rattling about in my head before I even start putting it on there, and that's where I feel personally most vulnerable. Because I'm not sure of the idea.
Yep.
And I'm just wanting for somebody to tell me, nah, it's crap. So you can go, that's gone, right? I can forget about that. Because part of you is working against yourself, isn't it? Once again, imposter syndrome and all that. That's at the very beginning. I find that's the worst for me, is getting over that first step, because you don't know where it's going to go. I find when I'm 3/4 of the way through it, you can say whatever you want, because I've got most of it out of my system. And even if it never goes to fruition, at least it's out of my system and it's there. And if the idea doesn't work, that's fine. But it's that initial start. And I think that's what we've been talking about this whole uh, show is that's the hurdle, isn't it? That
Yeah,
people have to get over. When you get over that first hurdle of from doing something to doing, or sorry, doing nothing to doing something, you don't. It's amazing where you can end up. You just don't know, and the world's your oyster.
exactly. And that was why we wanted to, despite this being, pretty uncomfortable for both of us. Cause like, yeah, sharing a rough draft is not fun. Thank
Mhm.
you, by the way, Chris, for enjoying the conversation and liking the concept. I hope you go check it out. I appreciate you being there in the comments. Um, but we wanted to really put our money where our mouth was with that, because that was what we were kind of like talking about the entire show, is like finish your first draft. It doesn't matter if it sucks. So we really did want to put our best foot forward there by showing people, yes, look how much it can suck. But like, we promised that by the time I go through these like 800 comments that Tamara made on this document that you can all see here, like, it will be a better story. And like, now I have something to work with. But you have to finish a story. And yeah, I think I am having a really fun time, like, looking back on that process and now seeing where the stories are in Rain Shadows.
Mhm.
It's really something to be really stoked about, I think. So
So
I'll
the
be
Rain
excited to see
Shadows
what people think.
podcast, was that a one-time project, or you plan to carry on with that?
Yep, we're gonna carry on. So we're actually gonna. Most critique groups have like 4 or 5 people in them. So for season 2, our plan is to invite 2 more authors on,
Mhm.
so that we have a more like traditional 4-person critique group. And then instead of obviously me and Tamara writing half of the stories, it'll be split into fourths. So it'll be, every fourth month you will have to write the story. Otherwise, you'll be getting a prompt or whatever.
Oh, that's and then straight away you're locked in. You've got you set yourself a deadline. You've got to focus. You need to get this done by this point. Blah blah. And things fall into place. That's I've never heard of that being done before. I have to say, and that's fascinating. And I think that's the antithesis of social media, because social media is all about putting the best things out there first. This
Yep.
unrealistic, filters, AI help, blah blah
Hmm.
blah. This unrealistic, putting this unrealistic expectation out there. And there's something to be said about making yourself vulnerable. First of all, that's massive, and actually going through the process. And it's back to what I was saying about the shit Dell was taking for absolutely no reason, just for putting out free tips. How dare you do that? You're giving away the secrets of. It's like, fuck off with that. That's. I'm surprised nobody's had a go at you. You're giving away the secrets. Anybody can become an author now by telling them. There are Muppets out there that get on like that. You're just like,
It's amusing at best and pretty horrific, honestly, at worst. But yeah, I'm glad you appreciate the format. We had a lot of fun with it, and yeah, there will be a season 2 that's going to be January 2026. We're going to boot that up. We don't know who our other 2 authors are yet. Tamara and I will obviously be back.
mhm,
Um, but that, yeah, so that next one will have 4 stories from each of us, and then 4 from the other 2 authors, that whoever they happen to be. We have some people that we're talking to, but nobody locked, so I can't promote that yet. But I will tell you, it's definitely happening. And then so in 2027, in 2 years, after we do another year of the show and create all the stories, we'll have a Rain Shadows 2 as
yeah.
well.
And then
And they're
that's
all gonna.
another incentive, isn't it? Then to get it
Exactly. So that way
the
we're,
end
we're
product.
producing content, like we were saying, content, but not just for the sake of content. I consider it valuable content that makes me a better creator, actively. So like, that's the only kind of like content churning I'm interested in doing, is the kind that I feel is genuinely making me better and genuinely contributing something to the writing world. That's, I like to think a little different, and hopefully helpful to people. That's all I'm really going for. Um, and yeah, Rain Shadows itself is a book. I don't know. Did you want me to talk about that at
Yeah,
all?
absolutely. That's what
Yeah.
that's what we're here for.
No, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to give away secrets on this podcast. Yeah. So the
Yeah, yeah. We've established that I'm all about protectionism here and gatekeeping. Yeah, that's the total theme of this, the
yeah,
horrific podcast. Yeah.
that's right. You there in the chat, keep it to your damn selves. All right. Um, so yeah, this is Rain Shadows. I'll hold it a little closer. So it's available for pre-order now, and it'll be fully out on July 19th, in paperback and everything. But our whole deal is these are all Dark Tales from Washington State, which is where Tamara and I both live. We're kind of like hoping to establish Pacific Northwest Gothic as kind of its own little subgenre, because this is a really interesting state. It has lots of like old folklore. We have a lot of indigenous culture here. We have cities. We have really rural areas. We have the high deserts. We have mountains. We have oceans. We kind of have everything, geographically. So it's a really cool place to explore. And there's a lot of like weird cultural stuff in the Pacific Northwest. If you've never been here, it's a very eccentric and interesting place with a lot of different cultures all just kind of slammed together. And that makes it really fun to write about. So like the way we did this collection, the way our prompts were formatted, I'll see if I can hold this so you can actually see it on the camera. Can you see that very well?
Yep.
Not really.
Nurse log. Yep.
Yeah. So each prompt was a 3-part prompt. So every story is built on the same prompt structure. The structure being they all have a Pacific Northwest location, they all have a horror trope, and they all have a Pacific Northwest quirk, which is the word we like a lot better than stereotype or whatever. But so the one for Nurse Log, for example, it was the Olympic Peninsula was the location. The horror trope was found footage, and the Pacific Northwest quirk was foraging for like mushrooms or wild edibles. So Tamara had to take those 3 things and create a story out of it. And then we have the other, 11 stories all follow that same structure, but there's a wide variety of prompts, lots of different monsters and creatures. And there's even a slasher in here. There's a zombie story, but I wrote it. So I like to think not your typical zombie story. And yeah, we go all over the horror genre with the tropes, and every single story happens somewhere in our home state. So that's a lot of fun too. All places we've really been and places we've experienced and understand. So that, I like to think lends a little bit of authority to it as well.
Oh, cool. Talking to zombie stories, I was catching up on fermented fiction. Latest episode there, you're covering 28 Days Later with Rachel Harrison.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
That's an interesting concept. I know I've talked about it before, but just roll the D20, both, right? You really like this movie? Both, no, you really hate this movie. Go. I love the way she went off. I thought that initially myself. It was like 10 minutes, go. And then the next person went for 10 minutes. I love the way she just like, bah, 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 bah.
Yeah, she was on it. She was ready for that.
Like, I need to speak too.
Yeah, I know. Colin's like, I would love to be a part of this debate at some point. But yeah, Rachel was a fantastic guest. She came with the heat. She was ready to monologue for 10 minutes straight about 28 Days Later, regardless of the dice roll, which nothing but respect for that. Yeah, fermented fiction is
clip.
Oh, sorry.
Professional, scripted. It's off the cuff.
Yeah.
Yes, it didn't go 100% by the rules, but everyone had a good time.
Exactly.
People need to understand that. That's what this is. That's what podcasting is. It's not the polished studio and everything sanitized, and you shouldn't be afraid of it.
I agree. That's why I love going live. This year was our first year doing fermented fiction fully live, and I like it so much more because, up front, it almost feels like it would add more pressure. But to me, in the moment, it actually takes so much pressure off because, like, you're just there in the room with each other and you're kind of all in the same boat and you all are aware of that. And so, to me, it honestly creates a more organic, free flow environment, especially when you cultivate a show the way we do with fermented fiction to be like kind of a vibe show. Because we've got our ridiculous format of that that D20 roll. Like, you come in and it doesn't matter what you actually think about the movie or the book. Like, you're going to roll your dice and you're going to have to roll the side that the dice gods choose for you. And so that right there kind of like destructures it to a level that I feel like it creates this environment of you're having a beer and having a good conversation with your favorite creators rather than listening to a super formal interview. And you cultivate a similar environment here on this show.
Yeah, it's just about having, at the end of the day, that's how you get to know people, is by not doing that. Oh, here's the same 10 questions that get asked every bloody
Yep.
time. What's the point of that? Oh, here's the soundbite, here's the gotcha question. I
Yep.
I would hate to think of, I would never enter my mind to do that to
Uh-huh.
someone. Like, that's
Yeah,
scummy
no.
as hell.
I feel the same way. And that, every creator like goes through so many of those interviews regardless, like they're all gonna have answered those questions somewhere. So at least on our show we really try to like create an environment where it really does just feel like you're sitting at a bar with them and nerding out about your favorite things, um kind of like you would have at a horror convention if you sat down next to this person. That's
Mhm,
how we want it to feel, because I feel like that's another way authors can promote themselves, and you do this too, Colin. That's why I like this show. But like, you can promote yourself by answering those questions, like what would a reader maybe want to know if this was a panel or if this was a formal interview, and like who am I as an artist as I present myself to the world.
yep.
And then you can also set it up so that they can promote themselves by just being who they really are and having a really organic, honest, to genuine, transparent conversation. And that's what I love. That's what I always want to do. So that's like what we try to cultivate on our show. And because I just want people to see their creators as humans.
Mhm,
Whether you're a writer or a reader, I think that's extremely valuable, because especially for writers, because Rachel Harrison's a multiple time New York Times bestseller. She's very, very successful author, but she's super down to earth. She's super humble. She's very friendly. She's giving with her time and her knowledge, and she's willing to come on our show, which is like, not huge. And she just comes and hangs out and has a good time. And that right there should show you as a reader. Like, if you didn't like Rachel, or if you didn't know Rachel yet, but you like her books, I think you would like her more after
yeah.
watching that. I did. I like her
Does
10
no
times
sense
more
of
now.
pretentiousness whatsoever. Goes with it, has a laugh, goes with it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And all of our guests we're using Rachel as an example, but I by no means all of our guests this season were fucking amazing. Thank you all for coming on the show. If you like any creators that we've had as guests, go watch them on there, because it is fun. It's like having a beer with them. It's a good time.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And that's what I try to get across to people that do this. Put yourself out there. Don't worry about choking to death on live stream. Poof. Oh, right. The most viewed video ever. But yeah, don't worry about personas or being super knowledgeable. I think that's something people worry about as well. Oh, you must memorize top 100 horror movies and every member of cast. I have a terrible memory. I might have watched the movie half an hour ago and I'll have forgotten names and stuff because it'll have melded into my brain with the 50,000 other movies I've watched and books I've read. And I actually mix up plot lines and stuff and I need to be reminded. You know what I mean? And I'm a presenter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and I don't let it stop me. And that's another thing I think people get hung up about. That must be I'm an expert. Oh, I'm a horror writer, so
Mm-mm.
I must be an expert in every author ever. I love it when people bring up names and I'm like, no, not familiar with that person. I'll
Yeah.
go back and I'll look them up afterwards. You know, it's not about this isn't a dick measuring contest. I don't say, having conversations with people isn't that. And
Yeah.
coming on the podcast isn't that. And if somebody is like that, well, they're not going to last very long because nobody's want to go on for a start. And really, is that the sort of audience you want either? It's not the audience
Right.
I want.
Right. Right.
They're in that shit because it's sad. Go to mainstream crap for that.
Yes, you better never become mainstream, or you're gonna have to eat a lot of words here, Colin.
No, I'd never trust me. My personality, I'm a bit long in the tooth now as well. I'm not a young pup, so yeah, the mainstream of me never got on. Even like in Normieville, work wise, the mainstream of me never got on. I've always been that square peg. I accept it. I embrace it.
Yeah, you got to. You got to.
Yep.
No, and I totally agree. It actually brings me to, I see Chris has a question here. As someone who's a novice writer, what's the best piece of advice you would give? That ties directly into that, and we've talked about it a lot on this show. But Chris, my best advice goes right with what Colin's saying, and it's like, don't be afraid to put your genuine self out there. That goes for both your work and for like going to conventions, appearing in things, doing workshops, like whatever you're going to do as an author to improve your craft and to like be present in the genre and the industry. Go in there and be genuine, be transparent, and be honest about it. And I think you'll have success if you do that, because you're amongst your people, you're in your community, and it all just kind of comes back to that for me. Like if you show up and be present, and the work matters to you, and the genre and the art matters to you, which I think it does for all of us here on this show right now.
Mm.
Um, that's what other people want to see too. So if you just show them that it's in you, then they're gonna like it. You know, they're gonna appreciate it.
Something I've come up against recently, and I never thought that. Do you need to be a horror fan to be a horror creator? What are your thoughts on that? That seems to be, particularly in short stories, seems to be the main thing now. You know, it's quite popular, and people like to submit multi-genre. And you've got these sort of jobbing writers that will submit to anything.
Yeah.
I have views on it myself, but I want to hear yours. How important is it to write horror to be a horror fan, or can you just be all things to all people?
Yeah. It's hard for me to imagine wanting to create horror if you're not a horror fan. Like it's probably the least popular genre to write in, and one of the hardest to publish, one of the hardest to sell. So I don't know why you would. If you're gonna write something you're not a fan of, just like because you want to get your name out there and publish stuff, like write erotica or romance or something that sells really well, and is a little more relatable to the general human. Horror is pretty niche, and you often you have to kind of bridge that gap for a lot of the people to get your books or your stories in their hands. At least that's been my experience. So I don't know. I don't know why you would create horror if you don't like it. It's it's pretty unpleasant if you don't like it, I think. But if you do want to like create horror, I do think you at the very least have to be a student of it. I do think you got to read to be a writer.
Mhm.
I'm very much a believer in that. Um, Not even just because like it's not like, oh, I have to see all the stories that are out there, I have to know these names that I'm supposed to know. It's not that. You should read the horror that you enjoy. And
Yeah,
but being that's part of being a part of the genre, is like understanding who's writing right now, who's doing well, whose stuff is inspiring to you, and then figuring out why that story is inspiring to you, so that you can apply the elements of it that work for you as a reader to your own work, and then you can create the stories you want to be reading. That's ultimately what I think good writing comes from a lot of the time.
it's something I've kind of recently becoming a publisher, and it sort of took me aback. And I'm like, well, what is this? And then obviously my goal is not just it's not just a one shot, turn up, here's your story, here's your money, go away. Now I want collaborators. I want people to get involved with this and start, like the celebration streams, a big part of it. Turn up, let's celebrate the thing coming out, let people get to know you, but also how long's a piece of string? When's the last time we spoke? 8 months ago?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did that mean that we stopped connecting with each other or didn't give a shit? It's one of those things. How long's a piece of string? We're here for the long game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to cultivate in this side of things. And I want people to come on board with that mentality. All of a sudden, I'm starting to find people who don't like horror, but if here's a horror story because I want money. I want to publish. I want my name to be published, and I'm sort of going, what? Here's your
Yeah.
100 trigger warnings. I'm like, what?
That's a strange one.
Yeah, not just
That's a
once
strange
now.
one.
This is multiple, and this has only been going. Horrific Tales only been going since the end of 2024. Not very long, and already I've encountered that multiple times, and I'm just sort of going, I wasn't of all the things I wasn't expecting. That was it.
Yeah, I have to say, I that has not really come across my desk, and it might be because of the specific anthologies I'm editing are very. But I mean, yours are horrific. Like it's as horror as it. Why would you submit to it if you don't like horror? Why would you write horror if you don't like horror? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and then I've seen there's this whole once again, my eyes have got open to start looking into it, and I see there's these whole slew of people. They just want to be a writer for the sake of being a writer. It's the prestige. Yeah, I'll use that word very loosely, by the way,
Okay.
because we're all. I think the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And that's why just sort of, I can't take myself seriously or stick my nose up in the air, because it's the more you do this, and even with the podcasting, the more you realize you don't know or you haven't got nailed down. It's all about that journey. And I find it fun going on that journey, because you get better. You look back in previous work like a year ago, and you're like, God, was that me? That was pathetic, because you've progressed.
Yeah.
But I don't understand these people. There seems to be this attitude, and you see it in film as well. I'm going to be in horror movies until I make it.
Yep.
What's her face? Jennifer Aniston's a perfect example. She was in the first Leprechaun movie, and then she just stuck her nose up and wouldn't even talk about it, as if something she was ashamed of, like as if she acted in porn or something. Do you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
people prouder of being in porn than the way she acted about being in horror, and she's not the only one. You see it with these idiots who come into the horror genre, especially failing Hollywood people now. I'm just going to do a horror movie, or I'm going to be in a horror movie, and they're shit, and then they don't understand why they're not accepted. I thought this was only horror; it would be easy. What is that attitude all about, of just thinking this is an easy genre that we'll just accept any slop? Yeah, we're very forgiving as an audience, because we understand the genre and the limitations, especially in movie. I think more in film, we're very forgiving because we know the limitations in budget, special effects, etc., etc. But
Yeah.
it's coming into writing now as well, that people think, oh well, I'll just write a horror story until I make it, because it counts. What do you say to people like that?
You are so far wrong about what you're doing there. First of all, horror is an extremely diverse, advanced, and very literate genre. I mean, you will find some very, very deep and masterful storytelling in the horror genre if you look for it, and that will go all the way down to like sci-fi movies. And the horror genre spans that whole breadth and scope. It is all the way across the spectrum. In terms of like the quality and what you can expect and what you will get. There's hundreds of subgenres. Like horror is an awesome, diverse, and beautiful genre. It's my favorite for many, many reasons, but that is one of them. So you're wrong about that. You're also wrong about thinking that it would be at all the most profitable. Horror is currently experiencing a renaissance. It certainly is. It is growing faster than it's ever grown. It's popular right now. But it all goes in cycles, man, and it'll go back down at some point. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm at least get something to hit before that happens. But if I don't, I don't. And regardless, like people that want to make money, they stop writing horror. That happens all the time. Like, I mean, George Martin wrote a lot of horror early in his career, and then he decided he wanted to like sell a bunch of novels, so he wrote Game of Thrones. You have and you see a little bit of reverse.
I
Like,
still remember Beauty and the Beast.
yeah,
It was a TV
yeah,
novel.
right. And most people don't even know that. A lot of like, if you read Dream Songs, his collection of his early works. I don't know if you've read Dream Songs. It's a great
No.
anthology. All his collected
I'm not a
works.
fan of George R. R. Martin, to be honest.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Well, here's the
Yeah.
thing. How can anybody listen to him speak for more than 5 minutes and not realize he's a complete knob jockey? That
Well,
guy's
I
so up
just
his
like
own
to read his
arse.
work.
But even Game of Thrones, that twists and turns. Like, the bit that really got me was the Melisandre chapter.
Yeah, which one?
Like, her only fucking chapter in the book.
Oh, okay.
Do you know why
Yeah.
each book's on a character's point of view?
Yeah.
So Melisandre, the fucking fire witch, whatever. Okay, now we get to find out what she's up to. She stares into the fire, prays to the god. 3 pages later at the end, like, oh fuck you. Oh, you what was her motivation? Where'd she come in? Here's her chapter to find out. Oh, that's what you're giving me? Right, nah. Fucking done.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We
I was
could
just like, I called them all the arseholes a day after that.
we could definitely do an episode on Game of Thrones. That could be fun because I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, but I can understand all the criticisms about it for sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why you would try writing horror. I get it's popular right now, but I'll tell you right now that like it is way harder to sell horror writing than it is to sell flash fiction or poetry or romance or erotica. Those four. And hey, I'm not shitting on any authors who do well in those genres.
No,
Those genres,
they're just in the zeitgeist. They're more palatable to the masses, and that's
exactly.
fine.
They sell well. And if you only want to write for prestige, if your whole goal with writing is to like get your nose a little higher, closer to God's ass, then the best way to do that is to just stick with poetry. Because you can write shorter things, you can submit all over the place because there's a bajillion horror or poetry markets across all the genres. And your stuff is a lot more subjective, you know? It's a lot more prone to subjective analysis and subjective defense as well, because it doesn't have to follow all the rules that prose follows. So yeah, I would say just be a poet if your whole thing is just to be a writer for the sake of being a writer.
Yeah, fair one. And that does mean you don't have to. Funny enough, I've written a book of poetry. So, but then after I got that one out of my system, I never felt the need to go back because that was all like just pure emotion, that book. But
And
once I got out of the system,
nothing but respect for good poets. For the record, I love good poets. I am not one.
I never claimed to be one either. Just like I said, it's one I just had to get in the system.
Yep.
No, but that's another thing as well. We won't go to the romance section, make a fake account, and tell romance people how they're shitty and don't do this and don't do that. Why do people feel they could do it with horror?
I don't know.
Why do people, it should be less violent, they shouldn't have these words, you can't call people insane, you can't blah, 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 blah. You're like, fuck off then. The clue's in the name.
Yep. Yeah. It's horror's always been that one of those genres that's, unfortunately not very respected. Again, it's coming around right now. More people are respecting it than ever have. But I think it's just seen as and part of it is like I think a lot of people hear the word horror and they immediately think slashers, and that's as far as they go with it, which is super not true. Also, that's like not saying slashers aren't good. But I think that people have a narrow understanding of what horror is. I think a lot of people think horror is like slashers, or it's like super gory. Like that is like one of the first things I always hear when I'm trying to sell a horror book.
Mm-hmm.
People will be like, "Oh, I can't do like blood and stuff, blood and gore," and it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of
psychological horror, your
isn't
ultimate
that
reality unraveling before your mind. In the
yeah,
Mouth of Madness, for example,
right,
Fractured, with Sam Worthington. I mean, there's loads of. Please don't add stream.
yeah.
I think
I'm
there's
not
forms you
dying
have
on
to fill out
stream.
if one of your guests dies. Have to submit to YouTube.
Yeah, that would be bad. We'd lose this whole 2-hour chat, which has been pretty productive. I'm doing my best. I have really bad allergies right now, so I'm just when I talk for a while, my throat starts to get super dry. But the point is, yeah, I don't know why necessarily. I think that is a big part of it, a narrow understanding of what horror is and how, again, just the breadth of scope of what the genre is, and also like what the intention of the genre is, which is, as you've discussed earlier in the show, like to talk about these things that are really hard to talk about the explore and analyze the human condition through these like detached elements of folklore or monsters or the personification of psychological conditions is often where psychological horror goes. And I just love that stuff. I think it's the best way to talk about the human condition and these universal like struggles that we all have, these universal fears, these universal prejudices and beliefs. They can all be represented so strongly through like monsters or supernatural elements or extreme circumstances, and horror explores that better than any genre in my opinion, and that's why it's my favorite.
Extreme human behavior, it's even the biggest monster of all, the human monster.
Yeah,
Scariest
absolutely.
still.
So yeah, like all that and more is what the horror genre is. But I think people just see a pretty narrow idea of what they think it is, or maybe what they saw and heard, oh, this is horror. And they were like, oh, I don't like that. So I don't like horror. And they just, maybe aren't aware of what everything that it can be, which is a lot bigger than that.
Well, that's why we're all here.
Yeah, exactly.
Try and break that stigma and introduce people to everything that we can. That's what this channel's all about, the love of the genre. And that's why I try to explore everything. I don't just cover one genre. 5 co-hosts, and we'll just go through classic horror, anime, slashers, true crime, you name it. If it's horror, it's on the table. We'll talk about gaming.
Weird slow burn
Yep.
Spanish horror movies like The Wasteland.
That was still fun to talk about.
I liked it.
Good.
That was a good discussion.
That was a good, that was a good conversation. We got into it and look behind it, but that's that's what we're here to do. And maybe somebody watched that who never even thought about it.
Oh, and two, just to tie this back, like you're saying, exploring the genre deeper, but anthologies are another great way to do that too, right? Because you have these themes like zombies or werewolves or something, and most authors who like are publishing regularly, what they will do is when they see that theme, the first thing they do is like, okay, how can I write a weirder version of that? How can I subvert that trope? How can I like write a werewolf story that nobody's ever read? And they're going to try to do that. So you get these anthologies around these themes that are usually kind of tropey or, expected genre stuff, but then the stories you get are all these like very unique, very different, very well thought out explorations of that trope from all these different angles that you would have never thought of yourself. So anthologies are great at creating that too, and that's another thing I love about them as well.
Well, that's like our first one, Hauntings. I was expecting, the worst thing would be 10 haunted house stories. I didn't get that at all. Just my expectations were, completely subverted, and that was great. Cryptids, same again. I thought I'd get 10 Bigfoot stories. Nope. Even the Bigfoot story I got was completely different.
Yeah,
not the usual fare, awesome. And I was just blown away. This one, already, the submissions are queuing up. There's still time for serial killers. I've got until the end of the month, and already, I just, you have that excitement. You just, what am I going to get? And I'm actually holding off reading these until the submission date actually closes because I don't want to skip ahead and plot. Okay, I'm going to accept that one because they're not all in yet, and I got a lot last minute. So I'm already excited to see what this one's going to bring and what the various views. And that's I hope the audience get that as well. Readers, that you're not going to get the same 10 stories, because if you are, I haven't done my job, and I'm sure you're the same with your anthologies. If you're just going to repeat and rinse 10 times, then are you even bothering? It's not the stories we want to read. We don't want to read an anthology and go, all right, okay, what's the point?
Yeah, and that's if you're looking for great ways to discover more horror authors, I highly recommend anthologies. Like find a theme or a trope or whatever it's built around that you enjoy, read it, and then like whatever those stories that really jump out at you, go read more from that author. Like that's how I find all my favorite authors these days. So
don't know the rabbit hole takes me. So Rain Shadows available for pre-order now. It's out in the next month. Last question, most important one. What's next down the pipeline then after this?
Yeah, so still, as you know, finishing a book is only the first step. So it's still pretty wrapped up in promoting Rain Shadows. It's definitely my big project right now. But I also, when we've talked about this book on the show before, but Crevasse, my rock climbing horror novella, it got a reprint through Dark Forest Press. So now it's part of a 3-book deal now. I'm officially finishing up the second book in that series. It's going to be a trilogy of novellas. So the first one, Crevasse, is getting re-released. That's going to be out in about 11 days, June 17th. Has a shiny new cover. Has a little bit of an update to the story. It's just been cleaned up a little bit. By and large, it's the same story, but definitely still worth checking out the new book because it's a little cleaner and the cover's cooler, in my opinion. And Dark Forest Press is awesome. Support your local indie presses. And then the second book is going to be called Cairn, which a stack of rocks that marks a trail.
Cairns they originate from the homeland here.
Absolutely. So a Cairn is that's going to be the second book, Cairn, and that's going to be released in December of this year. So I'm just polishing it up right now.
Fantastic. There you go, folks. Make sure you check out Clay and his work. I'm sure he'll be back on again, and maybe sooner than 8 months. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, you're going to be on Fermented Fiction before that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's we've talked about that there. Get on and get my D20 out, and my dice rolls are terrible. They always go against me.
I'm looking forward to it then.
So it'll be the worst movie ever. You'll I don't know, and then I'll have to like it. Already, I'll have to do it. If it's a movie I hate, then I'll have to like, I'll be 100% tongue in cheek. That's just me. I'll just have to like. No, I'm looking forward to trying that there. But Clay, as always, mate, pleasure to have you on. So glad this is coming to be, and looking forward to checking it out. And just as we said to everybody else, until next time, keep updated with the channel, do the technical things, and remember to keep it creepy, keep it horrific.